Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We are live on our monthly community conference here on Facebook and on Instagram. We're going to wait for a few folks to join us. My team is going to share the link for people who are on different pages, but also follow me on my personal page at Khalil Anderson. But today we're broadcasting from our usual page, my New York State Assembly page at Assemblymember Khalil Anderson on Facebook and on Instagram, as well as YouTube Live. You'll see the link and you'll be able to watch tonight's community conference where we're going to be discussing men's health. The month of June is Men's Health Month, and we're going to be joined by a few amazing guests who are going to share with us their role in helping to advance men's health and their role in helping to combat some of the systemic issues that impact many folks who address the issues around men's health. So we're going to let a few folks jump in and allow this stream to begin in a couple minutes, excuse me. Before we get started, I want to thank our guests. I want to thank our viewers for tuning into this very critically important conversation about men's health, how we preserve it, how we advance it, how we make sure it's equitable, but how do we make sure we prioritize men's health as we conclude the month of June and every month of the year. How do we prioritize men's health and make sure that we're investing in it holistically, and how it also impacts and has a domino effect on how our communities receive services, how our communities operate, how our communities are structured, and much, much more. I'm gonna wait a few more seconds to let some more people join the live. And we're gonna get started in a second. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining our monthly community conference series. I'm so grateful that you all are watching both on YouTube Live, on Facebook, and if you don't get a chance to watch us live, please make sure that you watch back the video and hear the rich discussion that we're going to have tonight around men's health. But before we get into tonight's program and our usual community conference, I always start out with a bevy of announcements and addressing the community on things that are pertinent to the needs of our neighborhood, but also things that should be on our radar. We're experiencing extreme heat right now all across the city, and there is a heat advisory in effect. New York City has opened cooling centers all throughout the 5 boroughs to help New Yorkers beat the heat. So please visit the city's cooling center finder online or call 311 to find out more information about where you can find a cooling center. Also, the mayor already put out information in regards to reducing power, encouraging all New Yorkers to reduce power as we're over our mega wattage usage across the city of New York. So if you have any unnecessary electronics and electricity being used, please shut it off in accordance with the mayor's guidance put out earlier today. If you are someone who's behind in rent due to the COVID-19 crisis, my office has been helping dozens of families apply for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. If you've been adversely impacted by COVID-19, you can qualify for up to 12 months of past due rents and 3 months of rent going into the future, and over 12 months of utility bills. Reach out to my office by emailing andersonk@nyassembly.gov or giving us a telephone call at 917-426-6199. Again, that's 917-426-6199. And lastly, we want to make sure that folks understand that there are job opportunities all across our communities. So don't wait. Don't hesitate. Reach out to our office. Currently, the YMCA right here in the Rockaways and all across the network of the YMCA are looking for lifeguards. They're looking for camp counselors. They're looking for all different positions to service in the YMCA, work with children, and work in administrative roles. So please review our social media and sign up for our email blast. You can learn more about any other seasonal job opportunities or other job opportunities that are available. Last but not least, I promise, and we're going to get to introducing our amazing panelists. The legislative session is over. My first legislative session is in the books. We introduced 25 new pieces of legislation, and I've been hard at work as we pass many bills throughout the legislative session. In this session, we made a positive impact on our communities and across the entire state, making sure that we legalized and regulated marijuana, fighting to make sure we protect rape victims, making sure that we invest in excluded workers, but also addressing the need for housing through the HONDA Act that we passed through the state legislature. So many great things that our office is working on, and we're going to continue to fight for the people of the 31st Assembly District. If you feel that our office needs to reach you, or you have an issue that is left unmet, please reach out to my office. We're open Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. for our summer hours, which start July 6th. And then we'll be open every other Friday in person, alternating Fridays starting July 6th for in-person services at our district and satellite office. Now, I think it's critically important that folks know that although the office will be closed every other Friday, we will be out in the streets holding mobile offices and mobile office clinics, so the services never leave the community and the services never leave the constituencies, which is so critical and so important to making sure that our communities get connected to the resources that they need to feed their families, the resources that they need to survive. We are an office that's active, engaged, and we're ready to service the 31st Assembly District, so I'm excited today. So enough of the updates. I want to bring in our panelists. I got to warn you ahead of time, there's a lot of power on this panel that I'm getting ready to introduce. A lot of powerful brothers who work in every part of the 31st Assembly District, every part of this borough, and every part of the city to ensure that we prioritize men's health, to ensure that we're getting the services to the people. And so we don't want to just keep that power for ourselves tonight. We want to empower those who are watching to make a difference in their communities, to make a difference in the 31st Assembly District, to make a difference in this borough and across New York City. So I want to start off by introducing our panelists in no particular order. You'll see at the bottom of our screen tonight, we'll be highlighting the panelists and some of the amazing work that they do in the community. So let me introduce the founder and the CEO of 100 Suits, 100 Men, Brother Kevin Livingston, who does incredible work all throughout Southeast Queens to keep our young men who are justice involved, to keep them active, to keep them engaged, to keep them employed, to keep them in a professional space. Welcome, Kevin.
Salute. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, King. Now I want to introduce our next panelist tonight, the founder and executive director of Community Capacity Development, CCD, none other than Brother K. Bang. K. Bang hails from Queensbridge Houses, the largest public housing development on the continent in North America, and he has the honor and privilege of servicing our community via Cure Violence. But aside from that, the work that he's doing and making sure that Cure Violence groups, making sure that community groups are fully developed in their capacity so they can best service our communities. Brother K, thanks for being on today.
Assembly members, it's a pleasure. Peace to my brother Kevin Livingston. Good to see you all.
Salute.
Peace and blessings.
Got two kings in the room. Let's get the other ones in. Peace, y'all. Let's see what we got. All right. So we have our Director of Youth Services at Queens Defenders, Brother Brandon Jeffrey, someone who's been active and engaged in and around the Rockaway and the Queens community for quite some time in his service as an organizer, but also someone who has worked and works with students, young people who are justice involved with the Queens Defenders, running their various programs, but also making sure that our community eats. The Queens Defenders opened up a food pantry, as did 100 Suits food delivery, rather, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, feeding thousands of families per week with no funding, with no budget, doing it because of kindness, the goodness of their heart, but also the empowerment they were able to bring to the community through their work. Welcome, Brother Jeffries. Thank you so much for being on the call tonight.
Assembly member, the honor is mine, and salute and blessings to the distinguished panel. Pleasure.
All right, excellent. So we're going to get started with our three amazing panelists for now, and I know the New York City Public Advocate, Jumaane Williams, will be joining us shortly. He's got a lot to share. He's got a lot to add and contribute to tonight's conversation. So we're going to get started with Brother K. Bang with his segment of tonight's Men's Health, Wellbeing, and Safety Conference, where we're going to be talking about a number of different issues, y'all, that impact men, black men, brown men, men all across our communities that are hurting right now. Men that often do not have the opportunity, the platform, or privilege to be able to share their concerns, to share their stresses, but to share also the things that they need to help better provide for their families and better provide for their community. So I'm gonna, as we are expecting the public advocate to join us, I'm gonna go right into Brother Bang's presentation and discussion really on gun violence and community safety. The discussion about about gun violence in our communities is prevalent. It's in our face. This is something we hear about every other day. Discussion about about gun violence in our communities is prevalent. It's in our face. Okay, little feedback there, but little feedback there. We'll get that fixed. So the discussion about gun violence in our communities is prevalent. It's in our face. It's something that's impacting our communities in every part of the city, state, and nation. And so before I even begin tonight's segment that Brother Bang is going to be leading on gun violence, and everybody's going to be contributing and jumping in, I want to hold a few moments of silence for the many gun violence victims across our district, across our city and state that have, again, fallen victim to gun violence. Just yesterday, I was out with Brother Jeffries at Ocean Village, where a 19-year-old was shot and killed a couple of days ago, a week ago, actually, excuse me. I was out at a funeral a week and a half ago for a 10-year-old who was shot and killed in the Edgemere section of my district. It's all hurtful and painful in this moment. As we are having this platform for black men, we have to have a moment of silence for the brothers and sisters who are victims of gun violence that didn't make it with us today. So I'm going to ask people who are watching on our social media platforms, as well as our guests, to join me in this moment of silence, starting now. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So without further ado, K. Bang from CCD is going to talk about gun violence, resources that are available to address the root causes of the issue. And then I'm going to pepper a few questions to our panelists around the subject matter of gun violence. Brother Bang, take it away.
So thank you so much, Assembly Member. Peace and blessings to all who are in earshot, to the esteemed panelists involved in tonight's conversation. Such an important topic. I think that your leadership has to be highlighted here because historically, this is not a commonality. This is not something that we have had this type of platform to discuss something as central, important. When you talk about black men's health, so many things fall underneath that umbrella. But again, the fact that you have stopped time, created a space where we can be brave, courageous, vulnerable enough to talk about the issues that affect our lives. The reason that gun violence takes center stage much of the time is because it is, as you highlighted, something that's spectacular. It's something that's undeniable, right? So because it has this ability to take over the scene, this symptom of the larger problem is what we tend to gravitate towards and talk about. But it leads us to understanding the many different levels and layers of health, mental health, quality of life issues in the community. Gun violence is the way that we get to have those deeper, significant conversations. So when we start at looking at lives lost in the city of New York currently, let's look at what's happening right now. After coming out of 3 pandemics, you have social unrest, political uprisings in the streets, right? Police brutality has gone viral. You have COVID-19. unprecedented death, pandemic, and then economic instability. People are nervous. People are frightened about what's going to happen with the economy moving forward. Then we see violence as the result to cap off all of this. But it's logical that that would happen, that after this level of survival mode action, people would take on this survival mode mentality. So when we talk about health, when we talk about gun violence, we have to understand that there are many of us in this society who things are done to and not for, who have taken on again, and many of us come from this in this conversation, this survival mode mentality, and we make survival choices in this spectrum of reality that we live in, right? So to move from that, we have to address the larger issues. We have to look at, the root cause of what has put us in these situations and these realities of violence. Mental health, key core component to this conversation. Something that you mentioned in my intro was the Cure Violence evidence-based model that we've used in New York City. But I want to just step back and paint a picture of a human justice approach to dealing with issues in the Black and brown community. I said a human justice approach because we understand that when we start from human, there is a chance that we can get to justice. When we start from criminal, more often than not, we don't find our way towards justice. So the approach, the lens, the theoretical framework that I'm a part of, that I help to infuse into the city of New York and other cities around the country, is a human justice approach. And it's simple. It says this. It says that human rights plus human development equal human justice. The human rights component refers to a level of consciousness, platforms like the one we're on now, where people become more in tune with what their rights are, what their status is, what they're missing from. Human rights are inalienable, meaning we're born with them. You don't have to earn them, but there's a level of information that has to be disseminated for us to be in that mode. The second component is human development. This speaks to the fact that resources have to be given directly to people. So when we talk about mental health work, gun violence, resources too often have been lost in the bureaucracy, have not landed in a way that have impacted people. But now in this credible messenger movement, you have persons who are directly impacted, who have been on both sides of the gun, who come from the lowest levels of the economic stratosphere, who are in leadership roles. This is the development component. When we combine these two elements, then and only then can we walk into something called human justice. The last thing I want to say about the approach to the work that we do, the methodology has to be trifold. We have to work on community empowerment, system change, and individual transformation simultaneously. So when talking about a place like Queensbridge Houses, I'm from Brooklyn, New York originally. That's the most populated borough in all 5 boroughs. So I know about being in places where there's a lot of people. Oh, I see our public advocate has joined us.
Thank you so much for being here, Jamani. Our public advocate has joined us. We're just having, just to refresh and catch folk up, we're having a frank discussion about the prevalence of gun violence in our communities and how I'm letting Brother Bang kick us off by talking about gun violence. And then I got a few questions for our panelists as we struggle with this pandemic within the pandemic. Yeah, Brother Bang. Thank you for joining us.
In closing, peace, brother. In closing, I just want to point to the fact that in order for us to really reach real change, transformation, then we have to approach the problems, gun violence included, in our community from 3 levels at once. That we can't do the business as usual superficial approach. We have to get deep down into where things are happening. And so when we say community empowerment, the awareness level in community, the empowerment of community, giving community tools is essential. We can speak specifically about how we do that around the city of New York and around the country. We can talk about what that looks like, and we should. We also should talk about system change. What I know about the assembly member, even the public advocate who I've worked with for years, you all are invested in legislation and making sure that legislation serves people and that policies are in place that really serve people. That is the system change component. That can't be left out of this conversation. And lastly, people like Kevin Livingston, who I've worked with as well, who I've seen, are very hands-on and work with individuals in the street on the ground level to make sure that that individual transformation is happening in a real way.
Thank you so much, K. Bain, for laying out that groundwork. I'm going to ask the public advocate to briefly introduce himself, and then I'll pepper y'all with a bunch of questions on this discussion matter. Then we'll move over to the next segment tonight, which is men's health and emotional well-being. You're on mute, public advocate.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Peace and blessings, love and light to everybody. Thank you, Assembly Member, for bringing us all together. Peace to my brother from another, K. Bain, Kevin, and Brandon. As was mentioned, my name is Jamani Williams, public advocate for the city of New York. I know I'm going to be talking, I assume in the next segment, primarily about mental health, but it's kind of interconnected because, hurt people. And people have spoken about the increases of crime and particularly gun violence in the city and across the nation. But they haven't really been talking about the increases of suicides that are occurring at the same time. And that just lends itself to understand that trauma is going to find its way out in certain places, not to be used as an excuse for behavior that we don't want to see in our communities, but really an understanding of what's driving it so we can address it appropriately.
Thank you so much, Public Advocate Jamani Williams, for your introduction and setting the stage for our larger discussion tonight, which is going to be key and critical, looking at root causes. So the first question I have for any one of our panelists tonight is, what can we do to keep Black and brown boys and men safe, not just this summer, but beyond?
Well, I can start personally.
Yeah, Kevin.
Oh, okay. I didn't interrupt. Well, for me, to keep them safe and to stay engaged with them is actually go to where they're at. One of the things I pride ourselves on is actually meeting them where they are, whether that be the street corner, bodega, the 6th building at Rikers Island, ACS Children's Center. We go to where they're at and build those relationships from there. So I think that's a very strong starting point to building trust and relationship with these young people, which we've been doing for years, like my brother K. Bain has done with community build and with 696. You guys know, we meet them where they're at. Really, really appreciate it.
So safety looks like meeting folks where they at. Brother Bain, you wanted to jump in on that?
Yes, I think it's important. Safety is the foundation. We can't do anything until people feel safe. There's no learning. There's no creativity, right? That is the prerequisite to anything that's going to happen that is productive. So understanding what safety looks like to people, that's a very valid question. What does safety look and feel like to you? So when we approach young people, to your question, that is something that we have to discuss and have dialogue about.
If I could also add to that, we have to reimagine what this work looks like. Kevin said it best when he was saying that we have to go to the bodegas, we have to go to where they're at. We also have to understand that this type of work isn't a 9 to 5. It's not a 10 to 6. And I know that everybody on this panel understands that, but more people need to grasp that. And then we're going to need to do more than just say, hey, I helped this young man out with the resume. With respect, that meant nothing to that individual. You have to walk with them. You have to help them and feed this level of journey and struggle, because we all know that there's a certain level of stress that can be compounded. But when you have like-minded individuals and brothers like ourselves accompanying them, that's where the real change can progress.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brendan. So and thanks to all the panelists for answering that question. Let me jump over to our mental health and emotional well-being segment. I know the public advocate is running around the city to these and making sure that every community is heard and men's health is prioritized. So I want to jump to his segment and talk about the public advocate and his work around mental health and emotional well-being for Black men. So critically important that we highlight and uplift Black men who are in positions of power. Public Advocate Williams, you have a well-earned reputation of being a fighter for civil rights, a champion for social justice. And as you address the crowd on the night of your special election results, I was there at one of the schools, counting the votes for you, and big supporter of you. But a few years ago, when you addressed the crowd, you were emotional. Can you talk about that moment and why it's important for men to be vulnerable, whether it's in spaces of victory, whether it's in spaces of losses? Why should men be vulnerable?
I think it's, I was very, first of all, thank you for being there, brother, and thank you for all the support that you've given me. I really appreciate it, and congratulations to you, man. How you came in that seat is important for people to know as they're figuring out how to get into this thing called politics, that you can do it in a way that is about lifting up people and doing the right thing. That day was really important for me. I had been talking about, my own issues with mental health and making sure that I'm where I need to be for quite some time, but never on a stage with that many eyes on it. And I felt like it was important as a cisgender Black man, as a first generation American from the Caribbean. These are communities that don't talk about these things as easily, even though they're probably the ones that may need it even more than others. And I've been trying my best to break down the stigma of mental health and mental illness, which are two separate things. Neither of one should anyone be ashamed of. There are people who have mental illness and they should have access to the care that's needed. We all should have a check-in on our mental health, especially like the year we just had, especially if you are, a community of more color dealing with issues of bigotry, especially if you're in the Black community based on the roots of anti-Black bigotry that's ingrained in our society and in this country. Mental health is a big thing. And we have a stigma of, one, asking for help. And if we get the strength, and it is strong to ask for help, to access that help in a very real way. And I felt like it was important for me to do what I can to really talk about what it meant for me to be in therapy for the past 5-6 years. And I wish it was something I had done sooner. And, thankfully now I'm engaged, going to be married in a couple of weeks. Perhaps if I had done the therapy sooner, I'd be in a healthy relationship a lot sooner. But of course, I wouldn't have met my future wife, so it all works out. We all need to check in once in a while. We don't usually have a problem talking about if we're going to go to the dentist, if we have a stomach ache, we go to the doctor. We need to break that stigma about checking in when we're stressed, checking in when the day is rough. When people ask, how are you? And we feel automatically we got to say, I'm okay. Now we got to pause for a second and say, some days it's okay to say that you're not okay and to ask for the help that you may need.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. And just like kind of sort of laying out, right, the crux of what we need to do to ensure that our mental health and our public well-being, our emotional, well-being is something that we're treating over time, and we're not waiting for it to become the powder keg. We're not waiting for the moment in which this thing peaks. We're not waiting for the moment in which we need it the absolute most, but we're treating it over time. PA, how has 2020 and 2021 impacted your ability to be vulnerable? With everything going on, with COVID-19 impacting our neighborhoods, with racial tensions at a height, with police brutality impacting us, with gun violence on the rise, how has these 2 years in particular impacted your ability to be open, to be transparent, to be vulnerable in your own right?
I think I've always tried to actually wear my vulnerability on my sleeve as much as possible as I navigated through politics, really trying to show folks that what I'm trying to do and what others are doing in opposition, like it's not magic. We're just human beings. And showing that vulnerability, I really feel like has allowed me to connect with people. Talking about, my mother sometimes would complain, talk about, I give too much personal information, but I feel like it's necessary because all of us have mistakes. All of us have issues we're working on. All of us are trying to figure out this thing called life, and being able to display that, I feel like gives other people permission to display that as well. And it's been really important to me. And this past 2 years, just like everyone else, has been very hard. I've tried to use whatever privilege I have as a cisgender male, as a citizen, as a person who's properly housed, as a person who has access to things as an elected official that others don't. I try to use that privilege to assist people who don't have that same privilege and who don't have that same voice. And I try to find spaces where it's needed. And I try to insert myself into those spaces to lift folks up. But, the racial justice protests and the Black Lives Matter, that really did impact me in a way that I knew I would be impacted, but I didn't even realize. There was a point in time, even now, I really can't watch some of the videos that have been put up. I still haven't seen the George Floyd video. There's just certain videos that at a certain point in time, I didn't even realize, I couldn't watch anymore. And I just wasn't watching them. And that has been still very traumatic for me. To this day, I didn't comment really on the Derek Chauvin sentencing. It's just like it's exhausting to have to translate these things in your mind and synthesize them on a daily basis, and that's still a traumatic thing for me right now. But being able to talk about it, being able to explain it, in itself is therapeutic. Because unfortunately, most of us who either haven't accessed therapy or haven't been allowed to express the vulnerability you spoke about, keep it all inside. And when you keep all that stuff inside, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to eat, and you're trying to figure out how you're going to live, and you're dealing with the police violence, and you're dealing with street violence, and somebody steps on your foot, that could be a recipe for problems.
No, without a doubt. And, I know you have to jump off shortly, PA. So I just want to thank you for your time and your moment in sharing what it is to be a man in power, but also to be vulnerable, to balance mental health, but also to balance your personal life. You just said you're getting married in a couple of weeks, so congratulations, King. Whoever that queen is, we all know who she is, but whoever that queen is a lucky queen, and we're blessed that you are moving in that space as well for yourself personally, as you help to be a leader, someone who inspires young Black and brown men across the city of New York to focus on vulnerabilities, or focus on emotional well-being and health, and it's so critical and important. Our city has a number of different initiatives and programs that address mental health and mental health and wellness. We passed legislation in the state legislature this year. I'm going to continue to put pressure on the governor to sign it. One bill in particular is a bill where you can call 988 as opposed to 911 to receive help as a mental health hotline. We declared gun violence a public health issue, crisis in the state of New York, which is so critical. And Kay Bain is going to pick up a little bit on that once we close out this segment. But there are so many resources that are being provided all across the city, free or low cost, to support mental health at this time. Before you jump off, Public Advocate, can you share with us some of those resources? And of course, we'll share those both in our email blast, on our social media, and to our constituency across the city. So you want to jump with us really quickly?
Appreciate you. I will shout out my fiance, India Sneed. Those who live in Queens may know her, and I shout out my stepdaughter, Amelie, as well. I think Kay was trying to say something slick, but thank you for not letting him get an opportunity to get in there. But we have some bills as well. The 988 number we had in the city, unfortunately, the administration has fought us tooth and nail on that. So hopefully we can either get it done here. Happy to work in partnership with you, brother, in the state, to try to see if we can get that. But I will tell people, you can call 1-888-NYC-WELL, 1-888-NYC-WELL, 692-9355. You can also text NYC-WELL. Text the word WELL, W-E-L-L, to 651-73. Text the word WELL, 651-73. Also, many of the groups that are dealing with gun violence issues like 696 CCD have access to mental health providers as well, that sometimes can help lead you in the right direction. The biggest thing is to be able to identify that, the stress and things that you're feeling, there's nothing wrong with you. It's also not something that you have to deal with, and that there is a lot of strength. The hardest thing sometimes is just to ask for help. And it is powerful, it is a strength, it is manly to ask for that help, so you can help not just yourself, but the community that you live in. And I think as Black men, it's important that we have the discussion. So I'm just proud and honored to even be a part of this discussion. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. Peace and blessings to everybody. Love and light to you all.
Real quick, Public Advocate, if I may, before he leaves, I just want to, in all seriousness, give him his flowers, right? Because just as this platform is very important and it's not normal, and I commend the Assembly member for having the confidence, courage, the fortitude to put this together, right? That's a real sincere statement. I have to say, as we address mental health, Jumaane D. Williams is someone that has always been courageously vulnerable enough to express himself in real ways. When we were younger in the county of Kings, and my mask was on full, right, and I was all in the streets, the integrity, the consistency of him being a real person and speaking his mind when it was unpopular motivated me. So I'm not sure if he stole my mental health therapist or I took his, but I know it was because his example, though, right? It gave me the courage to say, if someone of that stature, if someone that important is saying that this is okay, it gave me a lane. A lot of the times, us as young Black boys coming up, we don't see the lane because the real models, the examples are not there. For me, as a brother my age, still, the example of being someone who is responsible about their mental health, that came from Jumaane D. Williams.
Oh man, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you, man. And your life's been amazing. You definitely was part of the problem when you was younger, but you're a large part of the solution. And it's an amazing story. So it's just a blessing to be taking that journey with you. Thanks, y'all. Peace.
Thank you so much, Public Advocate, for joining us. Appreciate you all for continuing to this conversation. We're going to jump back into the gun violence conversation, but bring the context that the Public Advocate left with us around mental health to connect it to some of the reasons why gun violence is prevalent in our communities. I'm going to direct this question to Brother Livingston, who's doing a lot of key and critical work in the Southeast Queens community. Again, working with people as they transition from the incarceration system back into our communities. There's something that's missing along that journey that Kevin is helping to abridge. I want to start with this question, though, as it relates to that context. How have pandemics, and I'm not just talking about COVID-19, but gun violence, the pandemic of poverty, the pandemic of lack of housing, how have they affected men's health and safety in your work? You're on mute, brother.
All right, so I can start with me to say that it affected me personally. You know, I have no problem saying I just started going to therapy yesterday. Yesterday was my first session. And as a Black man, you know, I encourage my young brother. I would do it all the time, brother. Let's go talk. Let's try to, let me help you find resources. We just became a Cure About. We actually our site starts on Wednesday. Our site on Merrick Boulevard. And we're going to be big onus on mental health. But I actually started my journey yesterday. I believe heavily that the pandemic exposed a lot of things in Black and brown communities, especially with our young men. And just dealing inside of Rikers Island, what's going on in there, and the amount of violence amongst our young men, the amount of pressure and things that's going on with them is due to the pandemic. And so it plays a lot into it. And then I think it trickles right back down into the gun violence. So it has to be an all hands on approach, but it has to be a safe space for our young men to speak. We like I know I visited K. Bain's office, and he had a boxing thing in the middle of his office. That forces an energy that the brothers can actually open up and feel safe where they're at. And I haven't had the opportunity to visit Brother Brandon's office as of yet. But for me personally, I think that mental health and getting the resources to these men is going to turn the tides in this right away. Whether it be art therapy, speaking to a therapist, photography, whatever it may be. But these things are going to be outlets for our young men to get into their better hand.
That's you, Kevin, by highlighting, you're a figure, you're a leader here in Southeast Queens and across the city, as are many of the brothers who joined us here tonight, by you signing that validation, if you will, to go get therapy, to take a moment for self-care. Someone who's been working 15, 20 hours a day to service their community, we got to take care of ourselves. And that's key and critical. So I appreciate you being vulnerable in that moment and sharing with us how you cope with the struggles of men's mental health, but also with the work. It's so critical. I thank you for that, brother. My next question is for Brandon, and we're sticking to the topic of, again, mental health, and then linking it into how gun violence and community safety go hand in hand. What resources does your organization have, Brandon, to effectively connect with our quote-unquote hard to reach or at risk, I hate that term, but hard to reach brothers and sisters in our communities?
Well, first, I want to thank you for adjusting the terminology. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, our children, our young adults, our adults, you know, we go through a lot, but we are moving forward. I would also venture to say that we may not necessarily not be at risk, but rather underserved. And to that end, we have a lot of agencies, Queens Defenders. We do a myriad of different services to create relief, to create reprieve. A lot of times there's certain terminology that our young Black men and our older men hear, and that automatically makes them bring up these walls. They start to hear therapy, they get worried. And I want to thank Brother Kevin for sharing, like I did it yesterday. That says a lot, and it opens up the door to allow them to see themselves in those next steps. But when we're talking about the necessary relief and reprieve, we're talking about the fact that stress is still one of the leading killers in our society. And Black men go through, if you don't mind me saying so, the most stressful of ordeals and situations that can only be looked at as trauma. And they need this level of relief that can come by way of our basic necessities: work, housing, food. And that's not the cure-all. That's not the be-all, end-all. But fundamentally, every person, every Black man needs work, housing, and food. And to that end, Queens Defenders advocates for that. We have food justice, where we offer on Wednesdays and Fridays in the Rockaways, Wednesdays in Jamaica. We offer various forms of healthy referrals for work components, where we don't just send them to the agency and that's that. We connect them, we follow up, we find out what happened after that first interview, that second interview, what needs to be done. Most recently, we actually collaborated with Queens Library, where we have an immediate access technology support system. Now, this program ensures that those that are on parole, when they come home in Queens, they can automatically get set up and speak to a technology navigator that can help them navigate through technology services that they may not be privy to because they've been incarcerated. On top of that, they're going to be assisted on some of those basic necessities, like getting their ID, like getting their Social Security if it was lost in translation, or even getting their birth certificate. All of these are fundamental components that maybe some of our people in our society might deal with, but those that are coming home, that's every waking moment in their life. And we have to take it to task and be prepared to serve, because this is something that they can't just turn the lights off and that's the end of that. We have to be willing to help them out if need be, every day, 24/7. If they give a call because something is going wrong, we have to find ways to advocate. We have to find ways to mediate. The Rockaway Community Justice Center is in the Rockaways that can provide mediation to those that are dealing with levels of situations on their block, in their housing development. We have a tax prep. You know, there's so many fundamental services that needs to be done beyond just with one organization. I had the luxury of working with Brother Kevin as we continue to explore ways that we can connect for the community. We work with Queens Library to Catholic Charities, from Catholic Charities to Sheltering Arms. This is something where we have to take a look around and recognize that just like it takes a village to raise a child, it's going to take multiple agencies to truly see a change and see an end to gun violence. The engagement needs to be continuous, consistent, and, if I may be so bold, everlasting, because that's the only way that they're going to feel like, you know what, I can trust this individual.
Trust building is key and important. And I want to remind my viewers tonight that, again, we're talking to, and I started off with this, there's a bunch of powerful brothers who are on this panel tonight. If you don't take anything else away from our discussion, if you don't take the message, the core of it away from tonight, I want you to understand that there's brothers who are here who are willing or or are willing to give their time, body, and life to make sure that you have the resources that you need. Like Brother Jeffrey said, like Brother Kevin said, like Brother Bain said, and as a public advocate said, there are resources for you, and we are working to destigmatize you reaching out for those resources being a thing. So I think it's key and critical. I also want to say this piece too before I ask my last question related to gun violence, and then kick it over to Kevin and Brandon to talk about the economic opportunities that are available as it relates to men's health as well. So before I even get into that piece, I want to share this stat with you guys. As I'm talking to you guys tonight, I'm moderating this panel, I want to say that our viewership peaked to 20 viewers at that specific minute, Kevin, when you told folks about you going in and getting services. That means people want to hear these real stories. That means people who are watching tonight want to look up and support our leaders and follow our leaders, because they're leading us to a path of change and leading us to a path of being able to self-sustain. So I appreciate you sharing that moment, because our viewers saw it, and we also just hit over 100. So I'm grateful for that too. I like to put the stats in there because it helps me know that people are receiving and are paying attention to tonight's community conference. So thank you so much, Kevin, for that. So my last question on gun violence before I kick it over to Kevin and Brandon's segment on economic opportunity and men's health. Brother Bang, what strategies has worked in your community, in our communities really, to address gun violence, particularly in public housing? How does that work? Because in Assembly District 31, I have over 6,000 public housing residents who call the Rockaways home. And oftentimes there's a sense or a feeling of no hope. Myself and Brandon met with some tenant leaders here in the Rockaways who were damn near, excuse my French, but damn near getting ready to give away their rights just to be safe, bringing back stop and frisk and all these different things just to feel safe in their neighborhoods. So what are some of those strategies that you've employed in Queensbridge, the largest public housing development in North America? I'm not exaggerating. What are some of those strategies, and how have they worked for you?
And arguably the world, North America, but most likely the world. And it's why we focused on bringing good practices to that geography. And so the 6,000 or so residents of public housing, they experience the same deficit, that same survival mode mentality and consciousness that comes with surviving in those conditions. When you look at the 6 blocks and 96 buildings that have over 12,000 people in and out of them on any weekend, then you add the 5 or so thousand in Woodside, the 2 or 3,000 in Astoria. We didn't count Ravenswood. And then you look at the poverty line, $24,000, $26,000 in New York City is the poverty line. Under that, we see these housing developments. People are living at $13,000, $15,000 median income. Imagine. And then 4 blocks away in Astoria, parts of Long Island City, the median income is $136,000. So these poverty pockets exist, and people are living in them, and they see the dichotomy and the difference and the hypersegregation, just to compound the position and condition that leads to mental health and the stress. It was said earlier that stress is killing more people than cigarettes, gun violence, COVID-19 altogether. It's the level of stress that we in communities of more color live and die with that is actually killing us. When you look at the health disparities, when you look at the pre-existing conditions, it's induced by that level of, again, stress from survival mode living. But to the point of how mental health and gun violence intersect and what we're doing that works in housing developments. I was in Rockaway not that long ago at a shooting response, unfortunate event, but I saw Brother Brandon speak very passionately. I remembered as I heard him speak now where I first met him, and it was speaking truth to the people about the need for us to unify and to be in alignment around stopping gun violence. I think the consistency that Kevin Livingston demonstrates in his work is what is working for us. The fact that it doesn't matter what the geography is, he'll be there. If it's in Brooklyn at Juve, if it's in the Bronx when the child's life is taken, if it's in Southside Jamaica, Queens, of course, he's there, but he's there consistently. These are the things that are working. When we look at mental health and gun violence, again, as I said earlier, gun violence is a spectacle that's easy to identify, but financial literacy stops gun violence. Let me say it again. Financial literacy stops gun violence. So when we opened 700 bank accounts around the city of New York for Black and brown children in these low-income communities, we were addressing gun violence. The intergenerational wealth program that we have stops gun violence. There's some things that we implement anywhere we go. Just left Dade County, was in North Carolina, off the phone with Atlanta leadership today. And it's the same human needs not being met in communities of color. So the remedy, you ask for what solutions, what works in the largest housing development. How do you stop shootings for over 365 days in a space like that, with that type of challenge, with that type of trauma, with that type of historical oppression? Well, there's something called sustainable growth planning. And in sustainable growth planning, we map out aspirations. We tell young people and not so young people in communities of color who have had imagination literally and figuratively beaten out of them to imagine your life in 10 years. And let's set some goals and let's put some benchmarks next to that. And that's revolutionary. Sounds simple, but it is profound. What is your 3-year goal? What is your 1 year? We established that with young people who are told and labeled high risk, who are told that you won't live to be 21. We do that work with them. The second thing we work on is social capital, understanding networks and your network. Finally, we work on content management, which is that mental health component. We get young people to understand things as complicated as quantum physics in simple ways, things as sophisticated as epigenetics in very simple ways. The fact that your thoughts control things, that this platform we're on right now, which we were brought together by this assemblyman, this leader, was a thought, was a concept, was an idea that he had, but it was brought to fruition, just like this desk, this computer. So the power of understanding that your thoughts and protecting your thoughts, I could go in depth on all 3 of these sections, but the point is, when we combine this tool called sustainable growth planning, we see the same results in Honduras, Trinidad, Southside Chicago, Durham, North Carolina, Dade County. It doesn't matter where you go, because the universal human needs that are not being met are not being met, and the remedy is the remedy. It's based on principles, and principles supersede laws. So the work that we do to stop gun violence is about sustainable growth planning, and we are all organizations using different evidence-based models. Pure Violence is one of them, but I would say Kevin Livingston is launching a human justice site. And I'm going to work with my brother Kevin to make sure that these principles that we've seen affected over the last 10 years in New York City are part of his model, his mode of operation. I'm there to make sure that it's there, just like the other 31 sites around the city that we built since 2010. A $4.8 million investment that we've grown to over $70 million, and the results speak for themselves. I appreciate the time and opportunity to build and be a part of this panel. I look forward to speaking more with my brothers. I've learned a lot. Peace and blessings all.
Thank you, Brother Bang. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and pieces around, gun violence. I have one quick question before you jump off. I know you guys got to jump, but before we go into Brandon and Jeffrey's, Brandon and Kevin's piece, excuse me, I have a provocative question for you and for all the panelists before you jump. How does your work dispel the myth of Black on Black crime?
Man, so deep question, very good question. I think about Dr. Joy. I think about post-traumatic slave syndrome. I think about the fact that when people are oppressed to the point and hated to the point that they start to inflict those injuries and those afflictions onto themselves, and what that looks like in the community. The public advocate said, hurt people, and it hurts, right? What our business is, we're in the business of rehumanization of people of color. We're making sure to put the human back. When you look at the atrocities that we suffer, when you look at the history, you talk about health. When you look at Dr. James Marion Sims, the so-called father of gynecology and the treatment of Black women's bodies. When you look at the 4,000 plus people that were lynched legally in this country, right? When you look at all of the violence that we're taught, it was said that by the time we are in first grade, we've seen 8,000 homicides on social media, on multimedia, in TV, in motion pictures. So the violence that we see in Black and brown communities was taught by someone, somewhere, some system. We did not invent violence. We have been the recipients of violence for so long that it becomes a means to communicate. So in our homes, there's punishment, there's corporal punishment. So you are spanked, you are beat, right, as a protection, because when you step outside the house, many of us, like me, in a single parent home, our mothers were teaching us that violence could be inflicted upon you, and there most likely will be no justice for that violence. We're taught about law enforcement and how to engage and not engage in our homes at 6, 5, 4 years of age, because we're brought up in a survival mode environment that leads us to make survival mode choices. That's why as a preteen, as Jumani was mentioning, as a teenager, the mode of communication in my life was violence, but that was to survive. So here we are addressing the issue, dispelling those myths, and providing real models. Assembly member, you are the key to stopping violence in our community, because you are someone who comes from the community, understands the pressure, but has not been a product of his environment to the point where you set the tone, the higher level of communication, that standard that we need. And I think the missing link to finally break that thread of Black on Black violence is us being the change that we want to see consistent, like the panelists on this forum tonight.
Thank you so much, King. I appreciate you answering that question. And you're jumping off, but I wanted to just share the context of that question. The city did an article about the Brownsville Safety Alliance pilot, where in Brownsville, which arguably has among the largest amount of shootings in any part of the city, they piloted community resources, a community taking back the streets for 5 days, and crime reduced significantly in Brownsville. And so it helps us dispel the myth. The work that each and every one of you guys do on this call helps us dispel the myth of Black on Black crime, because violence is a tool for communication, unfortunately. Violence is a tool for someone to say, I need food. For someone to say, I need mental health services. For someone to say, I need counseling. For someone to say, I need housing. So the impetus of that provocative question was to really, really tie into the need for resources to be invested in our community, for the need for us to be able to have the opportunity to police and support ourselves the way we best know how. And so that model that took place in Brownsville for that 5-day period, and they're looking to pilot it again in the 73rd precinct in Brownsville, it's so key and critical that we look to that model and we understand that our community is crying out for resources and help. And again, violence is a tool for communication in that space, and we have to divert folk from using violence as a communication tool and telling them that we need to use other ways to communicate. Thank you so much, Brother Bang, for joining us. We're going to jump into Kevin and Brandon.
Appreciate you for uplifting. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Peace, King. All right. So this is the last segment of tonight. Two amazing folks who do work right here in Southeast Queens. The other brothers do work in their communities all across the city, but I wanted to bring it home and talk about two gentlemen who are doing the work right here at home. The segment we're going into now is economic opportunity in men's health. And I want to just have a discussion about resources, about programming, about how making sure that folks are financially sound begins to help uplift their mental solitude as men. So my first question, I'll start with Kevin and we'll go to Brandon. What is the relationship, and it's the same question for you both, what is the relationship between men's health and economic opportunity, whether it's housing, whether it's employment, whether it's returning home to our community? What's that relationship?
Well, for one, you have to be healthy to, economically move on and prosper in life. So there's a direct correlation with that. As you know, in particularly the district you cover, there is a healthy food shortage along Rockaway Boulevard, along 111th Avenue, Far Rockaway. We can have better food options in our communities, and so for me, there's a correlation between that. Sorry, y'all. Financially, we need to put pressure on these banks that we have in our community. We have banks that are here making money off of us and not pouring back into the community like they said. K. Bain said it best. Financial literacy cures gun violence, is one of the factors to cure gun violence. If you have a young man that knows how to manage his money, and we're teaching him how to start a business. I'm getting ready. I want to put the cart before the horse, but I have a grant I'm rolling out this summer to, in particularly, touch young men who actually pull the triggers and show them how to start a business. These are some of the things we have to do. We have to put pressure again on these institutions that are making money in our community. I don't want to call out no names, Carver Bank, but these are some of the banks that are preying on our communities, making money of us, but not pouring back into this community. And I have an issue with that. So financial literacy and health has a direct correlation. We need to change the places that we shop at, and we need to put pressure on the institutions that make money in our community.
I like how you slipped that in there, brother. That's good. Personal accountability. Go ahead, Brandon, for that particular bank. Go ahead, Brandon.
I love it. I love it. 3 words really sum up exactly what we're looking at, and that's health breeds wealth. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of times, as a people, our brothers look at health only externally and not internally. They're not looking at it as the mental health component. They're not looking at it as the fact that they're looking for the right type of food, or they're looking for some ways to put a meal on their family's table as a means to really get that type of mental health or peace of mind. A lot of times we see somebody, and if they're working out and they're fit and they're looking really strong, we think that that's going to be the true leader. The true leader is somebody that makes sure that there's a roof over your head, make sure that you can be able to have food to sustain yourself, and to be able to ensure that your family overall holistically are okay. And to that end, we look towards a lot of different agencies as well as within ourselves. We coordinate closely with Council for Airport Opportunity that was opening up and sharing tons of jobs that are available. And we've been with the Rockaway Community Justice Center, really tying them closely to that thread of getting them an interview, getting them that opportunity. And that also leads them into more types of conversation where we can find out, is there something else that you need? What else is going on in your home and in your world? Queens Offenders has in our Jamaica Center an adult career training program that's going to be taking off. And that covers 3 components, from education to internships and seminars that all lead to development. We need to do a better job as Black men in ensuring that we can develop one another. I can't consider myself 100% and to be for my people if I'm not devoting my time to my people. I just finished a conversation at a young man's residency. And in that conversation, we were watching some social media that in their eyes, they might have thought was funny. They might have thought was cool. And we had to rethink. We had to get beyond this level of miseducation so we can understand that's not healthy. How much are we feeding in ourselves the unhealthy items that are inside or outside in this social media platform? Why not fill ourselves up with some entrepreneurship skills? Why not look into some of the areas that can provide opportunity, not just for yourself, but for your family?
Yeah, thank you so much for that, both Kevin and Brandon, just giving us that essence, that substance that we need, so that folks can understand that there's a connector here. There is a linkage here between brothers who have economic opportunity or don't, and the health, the quality of their health, both mentally, both physically, and in many facets. So I thank you both for sharing that important context.
Assembly member, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to also share that for the young men that are looking for places in a direct resource to change within themselves, we have a youth justice court that is available that teaches you how to know your rights, advocate for others' rights. And we also have a building leaders in a new culture, otherwise known as the Blank Project, that gets involved with many ways of engagement and social rights. So please, we have opportunities to lead to your successful pathways.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brandon. And Kevin, do you want to share a little bit about your group and organization and how y'all doing the linkage? And then I'll ask our final question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sorry, I may have to jump off. Somebody needs to go to bed pretty soon. Listen, I love it, man. But black fathership, we're going, it's a better thing, right? For me, we are the solution. I can sit up here and talk about 100 suits all day. I'd rather not do that. We are the solution. When I say that we are the solution, we have to, just going back to the topic, mental health and men's health, we have to own our existence. We have to look back in the mirror and believe the person that's looking back at us. And it goes back to to tell you the reason why I started therapy. And I really want to drive home that, in beginning of 19, I lost my father. And then 20, I lost my best friend. And then I wanted to lose my best friend again to COVID a month ago, right? And so this stuff is compiling. I had to check myself. I cannot be strong for my community if I cannot go and get these things straight for myself. And so I implore Black men of any color, please take your health first. Health is wealth. In December, I have no problem sharing this. I was 280 pounds in December. 280 pounds in December. I checked my way out, 223 as of yesterday. Health is wealth. You have to take care of your health. I want to be around for this baby girl right here. She drives me crazy. Everybody always see me with her. But I really want to drive that home because it's important that we have to understand that we have to take care of our psyche. And to my last point, I was on the phone with a young king who's still incarcerated, but I have to call his program counselor for him to come out and meet with me. He's at the Queen's House over by LaGuardia College. And can you guys hear me? Okay. So he's at Queen's House, and the first thing he told me was, he said, I would love to have a suit. I don't know what it feels like. I want to look handsome again. He's only 24 years old. His kid gave 3 years of his life to incarceration, ready to come home, and we're gonna meet him tomorrow. But I cannot meet that man half empty. I have to be half full so I can pour into his cup with positivity and energy. So I just really want to drive that home. If you want to find out information about 100 Suits, 100suitsnyc.org. Go in there, you can follow up plethora of services. We're going to be partnering with Assemblymember Khalil Anderson's office a lot in just helping out in his district. We're proud of you, brother. We're very, very proud of you. Your community is proud of you, Khalil. You're showing young kings what they can do. You are showing young kings what you can do. You are showing my daughter what a young Black man can do. That's an elected official. All right, anyway. Right? But it's important that you show these representations. Brother Brandon is doing amazing work for Rockaway. So I just want to share that energy with y'all and just let you know that we are the solutions. It starts with us, and the time is now. I got to log off. Salute and light, y'all.
Thank you so much, King. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for the words of encouragement. Let's keep pushing. All right, Brandon. So you'll take us home with the last question. As we close out, what is your message to young boys and men of color who quite frankly have no hope for their futures?
You're not alone. We're here, and that means we have to be present. We can't, have Twitter fingers out, and reaching out to everybody through social media. We need to be out and about. It was an honor, Assembly member, to be there with you in Ocean Village, in OV. And it's an honor to be in all walks of the events and outreach services. And that's where, the real magic happens, to see Brother Kevin, to see Brother Bain, out and about, not just at shooting responses, but in outreach events where we can talk to these young kings. When we're meeting them and there's anger inside them because they see no way out, because they don't see a reason where they can change in their next steps, that's the true element where they need to be able to see you. They need to be able to feel you. And without that feeling, they're not going to really realize themselves. You know, echoing in Kevin's, sentiments, they can see themselves in you, assembly member. That's everything. You were talking about how can we combat, this myth of black on black crime. We do it with this type of panel, but we also do it with the level of love that we bring to the table. We're reimagining the love, where it's not just in a relationship of boy and girl. We're understanding that this relationship is camaraderie. This level of love is compassion for our kinfolk, for our extended kinfolk, so that we can make sure that I got you, my brother. I'm not going to let you down. I'm not going to let you fall. And I'm going to go to the ends of the earth to make sure that you were right alongside with me when we're being successful. This journey can never be by oneself. It's going to take multiple people. It's going to take multiple agencies. And I look forward to our village continuing and pushing forward with an assembly member like yourself and with agencies that have leaders like the kings on this panel at the helm.
Thank you so much, Brandon, for those powerful, essentially closing words to tonight's extremely powerful panel. I told y'all we have some power. I warned you guys that we're going to have some powerful brothers on this panel tonight from all across the community that are doing the work, that are a part of the solutions, that are investing resources in our community, that are looking to change the narrative, to change the story of what it is to be a black man in the inner city, what it is to be a black man growing up in Far Rockaway, what it is to be a black man growing up in public housing or in Brooklyn, or in the, as Kay Banks says, in the county of Queens, the county of Kings, rather. And there's a play on words there, which is key and critical, which I, of course, appreciate him for. I'm so grateful and thankful for you, for the panel, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm going to close out by taking Q&A on behalf of our panelists as they exit out. We're so thankful for you bringing here Brandon, for the public advocate, for Kay Bang, and for Brother Kevin Livingston, and looking forward to continued partnership to changing that narrative for our young black men, for black men in all facets, but also prioritizing black men's health through that process. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Love and light, everyone.
All right, folks, I want to open up to questions for and on behalf of our panelists who are jumping off, running to other obligations, but spent an hour with you here tonight to really share, one, their emotional stories, to share their struggles, but also to share how they're giving back, how they're working to change the narrative right here in Southeast Queens. So if folks have questions, if folks have thoughts, if folks have feedback, now is the time and opportunity to share that on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Right here on the screen is where our questions and responses are going to come up, but I'm also going to be getting those read aloud via the chat and by my staff. Christina, you want to jump on and just help us get some of these questions in? Or Carl? Want to make sure that people who have questions regarding tonight's panel, questions regarding resources, questions on how we move our community forward, and we focus on black men and developing our brothers in these moments of uncertainty and, quite frankly, fear. All right, let's see what we have on the dais here. Do we have any questions here? Any comments, anything that folks want to share regarding our panelists? If not, we will close out tonight's community conference panel discussion. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. But I want to reiterate a key message of tonight's community conference and tonight's panel discussion. Tonight, I want to just say that you are not alone. Resources are here for you. Brothers want to uplift you. Brothers want to invest in you. You just have to feel comfortable and have the space to reach out for the help and supports that you need to help build and advance yourself, to help guide you through the processes in which young Black men often get categorized, or often get skipped over, or often don't get to treat their mental health, often are stigmatized. This is your moment and opportunity that we are here with you. You're not alone. And I want to thank the nearly 100 folks who tuned in tonight, and the hundreds of folks who will watch it back later. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank my staff and our tech team in the back who are working to make sure that this is viewed by folks in all platforms, Zoom, Facebook, YouTube Live, you name it, we've got it out there. We want to make sure people are hearing our message that you are here. We are here to support you. As your state assembly member, as someone that represents you here in the 31st Assembly District, I want you to know that I'm active and engaged in working to address the root causes that lead to gun violence, the root causes that lead to mental health deteriorating in Black men, the root causes of why our community suffers so mightily in these moments of crises, but also in general moments where there aren't a crisis, but there's still suffering of our people. Thank you, everyone, tonight for joining for our monthly community conference. Every month, the last week of the month, we host a community conference so that our community could get access to resources and information, hear from speakers, but also have the opportunity to be engaged by your state elected official. We're going to continue this work. I'm hopeful that at some point, as we move out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we recover, we can begin to have these conferences in person, in parks, and in different areas of the 31st Assembly District. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. Let's continue to prioritize men's health, and remember, you are not alone. Thank you so much.